Good morning all. So, now again we would be proceeding further with the modal verbs that we are already dealing with. So, now in modal verbs when we are talking, we have completed, yes, in modal verbs we have completed can, could. We have even learned the difference and the similarity between the can and could, when to use can, when to use could. We have even completed shall, will, again how to use shall, how to use will, when, and again the similarities between them, that if they can be used, either this or this can be used, how would we work it out? Then yes, we have also completed may, might. Again with may and might we know well, when can we use may, when, might, and again when it cannot be used. What is the right way of using may or might? Fine. And apart from that, we have also learnt must, that what is the right way and how would we be using the modal verb must. So, now we would be proceeding further with, this is all that we have completed. Now, we would be proceeding further with, and yes, when we are talking about should, let me tell you guys, the modal should. Well, even when we are looking at should, let us even talk about should and ought to. Fine, let us talk about should and ought to, because it is that we can use them, and how can we use both, either this, or when to use either this or this. So, let us learn both should and ought to, which could make our understanding and learning easier. Fine. So, now when we are talking about the first point about should that we would take care of is the modal should or the modals should and the ought to indicate an obligation. These two, when we are talking about these two, both the modals when we are talking are synonymous. Fine. This is again that we need to remember, that the modal should and ought to, fine, this both, this either if we use should or ought to, fine, we can use any of them, and when we use should or ought to, that indicates an obligation. That indicates an obligation, and these two modals are synonymous, either this or this, both if you use, the meaning goes same and it can be used. Fine, it can, any of these can be used, and it would not be wrong, the meaning would be remain the same. Fine, let us take some examples. You should or ought to call your mother. Fine. So, this is an obligation that we are giving. You should or should or ought, any one which we use, you should call your mother or you ought to call your mother. See, when we would use ought, please remember we would use it as ought to, but it would remain only should. Should to, it would not come, please. So, do not get confused. In future when you are using, use should independently and ought to. So, you should call your mother, it would be you should call your mother, or you ought to call your mother, you are supposed to ought to call your mother. Let me give you one more example. I should or ought to go home now. So, again let me remember, let me tell you, let me remind you, or let me tell you again in the same thing. I should go home now. I should go home now, or I ought to go home now. Fine. So, again as these are synonymous, fine, this both should and ought to are synonymous. Any one can be used, but again should would not go with to and ought to. Fine, go home now. Now further let me tell with one more point that you need to remember. When used in question form, fine, should asks if an obligation exists, and in the same way ought is never used in question. This is again a very important point. Please remember, fine, when used in question form, when you are using should, asks if for the obligation it is should that asks for whatever obligation it is, if an obligation should exist, fine, should be used, fine, for an obligation that exists we would be using should, and ought is never used in question. This is one very important thing that we need to remember. Ought never used in question. This is again a very important point. So, anytime, even if they are synonymous, but this is one blind rule that we are supposed to follow, never use ought to if it is in a question form. Let me give you an example. Fine, should he call her? Fine, again over here ought to he call her would never come, or ought he call her would never come. It is should he call her. So, again it is an obligation, you should or you ought to call your mother, fine, when we have told a statement. So, again we are telling, so should he call her, again we will not use ought to over here. Please remember, it is a blind rule, we cannot use ought to in this. Should he call her, fine, and let me give you one or two more examples. When should we leave? Again when we are looking at when should we leave, when or to we leave would not come. So, in question form we will never use ought to. When should we leave? Or let me give you an other example in another way. Okay, let us go with should we pay now? Should we pay now? When we are taking it into a sentence, we ought to pay now, we should pay now. Fine, we can go for that, but when it is into a question form, it is simple, should we pay now, ought to would not be used. Fine, I hope this point about should and ought to is clear. Fine, so should when it can be used, ought to when it can be used. I hope this concept is clear in the mind. Now, when we are going further, let us understand about should and shouldn't. So, again should is positive, shouldn't is negative, but again how do we use, when do we use, what are the conditions in which we can use them, what are we supposed to follow. So, let us understand this. So, now when we are going with should and shouldn't, should not are used to make an assumption about what is probably true if everything is as we expect. So, please, this thing needs to be understood well, and please understand this well. Should and shouldn't, when we are talking about should and shouldn't, are used to make an assumption. To make an assumption. What is assumption? that which we are assuming, we are thinking, we do not know whether it is true or not. It is only that we are assuming it, it is our assumption, it is what we think, what we are assuming. Fine. About what is probably true. Again let us remember about what is probably true. We do not know whether it is, might be something which is planned, was to go as per the plan. So, we are assuming that yes, things have started well, but we do not know whether it has started or not, we are not in the live situation. So, I am assuming it should have been started by till now, but I am not sure. So, which could be probably true, but again I am not sure. Fine. If everything is as we expect, because I expected, I was expecting the exams are supposed to start. Fine. So, it should have been started by now, because it is as everything is as we expect, the timetable shared, it is planned. So, as we expect it should be. So, the probably this is the true, but again I am not at that situation, I am not over there. So, I am assuming it, the examination should have started as planned as per the schedule. So, again I am not sure, but probably it should be true that yes, it should have been started as per the time mentioned, as per the time allocated. Fine. So, again please remember this, and then let me share few examples again for this. Okay, they should be there by now. Fine. They should be there by now. Again it is someone is supposed to come, and as per the planned timing what is scheduled, everything is there, but I am not over there. So, it is like they should have come by now. So, what was the expected time and other things. So, by now they should be at home. So, they should have come. So, again I am assuming it, I do not know, live I am not there. So, I can only assume it. Fine. And for more confirmation, when I confirm it, again the modal verb will change. Fine. But when it is for assumption, only that we will use should. And another example, okay, for shouldn't even, let me give you an example. Shouldn't take long time to drive here. See, we are talking to some person, to some second person. So, we are like, might be they are asking how much time would it take for me to come there. So, I tell it shouldn't take long time to drive here. See, again it is an assumption. Why I am assuming it should not take time, but again some conditions could happen, that there is too much of traffic or some unexpected conditions. In that situation, again it might get late, it might take time, but again when I am saying it shouldn't take long time to drive here, when I am telling a person, again I am assuming it that it would not take a long time. So, again it shouldn't, in this case again it shouldn't take long time to drive here. In such case we would be using shouldn't. Next, in this again we need to take care of should and shouldn't, we need to take care of this use of should isn't usually used for negative events. Fine. So, we need to remember, guys, the use of should isn't usually used for negative events, but again fine, instead we use will. We need to remember this one thing, that as we said, the use of should, fine, the use of should isn't usually used for negative. We never use it for negative. It's never used for negative. Instead, we use will. Instead of using in negative, instead of using should, we will be using will for the negative thing. Fine. So, now let me give you some example and the reason when we are saying is the underground will. So, in this case example, when we are looking into this example, the underground, fine, the underground will be very busy now. The underground might be we have some work in the underground, but again it is very busy now. So, we might not be able to go there, we might not be able to get our work done. So, again the underground will be very busy now. We will not say the underground should be, again it is should be would go with assumption, fine. In this case we can only talk when it is surety. So, in such cases when it is a negative this thing, we are, as it is busy now, it is not free. So, it is the underground will be very busy now, because we know it would take, it is something fixed assignment at that time, even for short time we go, it is a time that the work is to be done, it is not free now, it is busy now. So, it will be underground will be very busy now. Again let me tell you how would we use it. Should, please take care of this thing, should plus have plus past participle. Okay, let me go with this into, fine, let us go with the next this thing. Fine, now when we have should plus have plus past participle, should plus have plus past participle. So, now when we are learning this, what are we supposed to take care? Now, let me tell you, see, should have past participle when we are talking can be used to make an assumption about something that is probably happened if everything is as we expected. Again, see guys, please remember, when we are talking about should, have and past participle, how would we use it? This can be used to make an assumption about something that is probably happened, fine. If everything as we expected, see, something was planned, we were not there. So, again when we are talking that about that event, fine, which we assume should have been completed by now into a proper way as expected, fine. So, in that case we would use should have past participle. I will give you an example for this, but again one thing that we need to take care of is compare with, this can be compared with present of should above, fine. Now, example let me give you, the train should have left by now, fine. The train should have, fine, left by now, left is again past participle, fine. So, again when we are taking care of, it should be again, fine. Again when we need to take care of is the same thing, can we, this is an assumption that we are making and probably it should have happened, the train should have left, but someone was to go now, someone today or now the expected time was supposed to go somewhere, but you were not there. So, when you are telling it to your friends or someone, you would say the train should have left by now. Fine. So, now next example when we are taking it, now next let me understand about would. We need to understand about would, and when we are talking about would, the next modal verb we are talking about is would, and when we are talking about would, please let us remember would is used for unreal situation or imaginated, fine, imagined situation for, yes, when we are talking about, see, when we are talking about would is used for unreal situation or imagined situation. Fine, we are not sure, it is not the fact, it is not real, but it is only our imagination. So, in that case we can use would, and let me give you an example, let me give you 1 or 2 examples for this. Fine, yes, okay, I would love to visit New York. So, again it is, this is what I want, my imagination it is not the real fact right now. I would love to visit, if I would be able to or not and all, I do not know, but this is my imagination, my like fantasy. I would love to visit New York. Let me give you one more example. Okay, she would like to be a professional footballer. Again it is, she would like to be a professional footballer, like we all have our goals, our imaginations, fine, our dreams. In that case I would like to be a professional footballer. So, she would love to be a professional footballer, but again it is not at present, it is not a real condition, it is her wish, her dream, fine, and so when she becomes, then it is a different thing, but at present it is unreal situation, it is an imagination, it is her dream, fine. So, again in that case we would be using would. Again let us understand in detail the uses about would. Second point that we need to take care of is would and wouldn't. Are the past tense of will and won't. Again we need to remember is would and wouldn't are the past tense of will and won't. They are the past tense of will and won't, fine. So, again when we are taking, let us understand with the example. Okay, when we are talking about direct and indirect speech even, yes, let me give you the example with this, because when we are talking about direct and indirect speech, again this difference we need to use it, when will, would, won't, wouldn't. So, how would we use it? Fine, let me give you example. Let me take, okay, direct speech we are taking. Avinash is the speaker. I will be late. I will be late, and this is in direct speech. The same way when it goes to indirect, same thing, fine. Avinash said that he would be late, fine. See, in direct speech we have clearly said Avinash is saying I will be late, fine, I will be late today, we can take it. So, in direct speech he says I will be late today. Now, when The second person is telling about Avinash to some third person. Avinash said that he would be late today. We will not use he will be late today. Again this goes to indirect speech then. Fine, indirect. Some other person is talking on behalf of Avinash. So in this case we would say Avinash said that he would be late today or he would be late. But again if you are using Avinash said that he will be late, again this is the mistake that you have done, because you had to change the will to would. It is not that directly you are telling that I will be late, he would be late. Fine. Again, next point that we need to take care of is, next point that we would take is would and wouldn't, or let us take would in conditional, okay, let us take this point, would in conditional sentence explains an action as a result of a supposed to or real condition. Please remember would in conditional sentence, this is again one conditional point. Fine, would in conditional sentence explains an action, as a result of a supposed to or real condition. This we need to remember. This is important because if we know this, we would not get confused in will, would and all those. Fine. So, would in conditional sentence explains an action. How? I will give you an example. Let us go with an example. So, our understanding becomes easier. I would go with you if didn't have to work. Fine, again this is conditional. How? I would go with you. Fine, I would go with you, but conditional is if didn't have to work. So, if I have no work, I will go with you. So, again the same thing, I would go with you if didn't have to work. If no work, I would go with you. If not, again this is a conditional sentence. Let me give you another example for the conditional sentence. Okay, if I had worked harder, I would have passed the test. So, again this is a conditional sentence. How? If I had worked harder, I would have passed the test. So, again this is a conditional thing. I failed. What was the reason? I did not work harder. If I would have worked harder, if I had worked harder, I would have passed. Fine. Or even if I would have worked harder, I would have passed. Fine. So, again these two examples I hope would make your understanding clear. Now, next point that we go with, would not will be used as to refuse. Would not is to refuse. How? Let us go with example. I asked him if I could borrow his car, but he wouldn't. Would not again can be used as wouldn't lend it to me. So, please understand guys, would not is wouldn't. So, I asked him if I could borrow his car, but he wouldn't, refused. It is clearly refusing. I asked to borrow, but the opposite person he refused. He wouldn't lend it to me. he bluntly refused that he wouldn't lend it to me. So, it is a clear refusal, fine. So, it is would not is to refuse, fine. And now let us understand one more point. Again please remember guys, it is again taken care of is would for past actions. This already we have understood, we have already learnt. So, this point please remember, would is for past actions. I would have done, it is about the past, fine, I would have done. So, again would is one clear point we remember, would is used for past actions. Next let us learn one more point, let us understand one more thing. Would can be used to talk about action that repeated in past. In the past, it is again used in the same context as used, fine. Now, let us see how would can be used. Please let us understand, would can be used to talk about actions that repeated in past, actions that are repeated in past, and it is used in the context as used, even used when we would say that is already done in the past. So, the same context again would can be used, fine. So, let us know or let us understand it better with an example. Okay, so let us take the example. Okay, when I was young, I would do my homework every evening. See, understand in this, when I was young, I used to, fine, I used to do my homework every evening. Instead, we can use when I was young, I would do my homework every evening. This is even a right way. So, instead of used to, we have used would. So, when I was young, I used to do my homework every evening, even that is right. Instead of used to, we are using when I was young, I would do my homework every evening. Let me take one more example. In the summer, we would always go camping, fine. So, when we are taking care of, please understand this sentence, in the summers, we would always go camping. So, we used to, again about the past tense when we are talking, we used, like in the summers we used to always go camping. Same thing now when we are saying in the summers we would always go camping. So, this was our usual routine that we used to follow in summers. So, again instead of used to, it is would. So, I hope this one point is even clearly understood, that would can be even used in place of used to, fine. Again, next point when we are looking at would followed by, again please remember this one point, would followed by like is polite way of stating a preference or can make a request sound more polite. So, again please understand, would when we say would followed by like, would followed by like, this is mainly to understand would followed by like is polite way of stating a preference or can make a request, like it sounds more like a request. Like example I would give, I would like to have coffee. So, it's again an indirect way of requesting, that a more polite way of requesting that I'm wanting to have coffee, fine. So, I would like to have coffee. So, would followed with by like. Fine. So, again let me give you some example for a better understanding. We would like a room with a view. So, this is that this is our preference. This is what we would like. We would like a room with a view, which has good view, a good like background. When we open the windows or we are in the balcony, we could have a good sightseeing, a good view. Fine. So, one of the examples, another example, as I told, I would like to have a cup of coffee, or I would like to have coffee. So, this is how we would use would followed by like. Next, when we go into the same this thing would, let us understand one more point. Again in question form, guys, in questions, would plus subject, please understand, in questions, would plus subject plus like is polite request for a choice to be made. So, now again we would take care of this would plus subject plus like, would plus subject plus like. Fine. First we learned about would followed by like. Now it is would plus subject plus like is a polite request for a choice. It is a polite request for a choice to be made. Now let me give you an example. Would you like soup or salad with your meal? So, we are asking someone. So, how would you ask? Would you like, would is there, subject is you, and then like, would you like soup or salad with your meal? So, the preferences that we have asked the person to choice, request for a choice when we are doing it, this or even anything that we are trying to know the person's preferences with your meal. It would be would you like. Fine. Like would, this would plus subject plus like. And so, example is, so I think with the example you could understand. Let me give you one more example. Okay, when would you like to eat or have dinner? So, again when we are looking is when would you like, fine, when would you like to eat dinner? Again into this question form, we are asking the preference, when would you like to have your dinner. So, we are asking when would you like to eat dinner, fine. So, this is again we are asking the person's preference, what is the time that the person is comfortable and would like to have dinner. Okay, the next point let us look into. Would introduces habitual action in the past. Fine, this is again one important point that we need to remember. Would introduces habitual action in the past. In the past, an habitual action which now we are talking about. So, example let me give you. When I was a student, I would go swimming every day. So, again we would introduce a habitual action, fine. So, swimming every day. So, when I was a student, I would go swimming every day, fine. Again we are talking about some habitual action, would introduces, fine, habitual action in the past. So, when I was a student, I would go swimming every day. Next, when we are looking into one more example, let us look into, okay, when Rakesh lived in Mumbai, he would write me long letters. So, again this was his routine or his habitual action. When Rakesh lived in Mumbai, he would write me long letters. So, when Rakesh was living in Mumbai, he was habitual of writing me long letters. Whatever happened, he used to write it to me. But might be now the action is changed. So, again in this case we do this. Fine. So, I hope we are clear in understanding all the remaining, till now that we have learned all the modal verbs. So, at the end let me conclude. So, I hope we have understood all these modal verbs, conclusion for this modal verbs. Fine. So, we have now well understood can, could, shall, will, may, might, must, should, ought to, should, shouldn't, would. And I hope this modal verbs now would make our language, the usage of our language while talking more comfortable, that yes, if I am requesting, what do? I do not do that small, we do not do that small mistakes that when we did not know, like for will and would that we stated. Fine. And the difference is now that we understand when are we supposed to use can, when could, when shall, when will. Fine. And should and ought to, how would we use it? Should and shouldn't, when can we use it? What are the advantages and what are the more learning that we have learnt about would? Again, will and would, how can they be used? Will, would, won't, wouldn't. Fine. So, I think your learning has become more detailed and organized about the modal verbs. So, I hope now when you are using this modal verbs in your routine during talking or during writing, during conversation with your friends, I am sure your communication would become more stronger and more better. So, hope you have a happy learning. Have a great day.